Hello everyone, I hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are. My name is Annabelle Lee and welcome to another episode of Talking Classical. I'm sure you're all aware as well that it's only a few days until Christmas, and so if you're a little bit fed up of all the commercialism surrounding the big day, then I hope that this podcast can provide a nice little antidote to that. And today we're going to be exploring classical music marketing and PR. And in order to delve into this, I was able to meet up with Dr Marius Carboni. He was formerly at EMI Classics and also the promotions manager at Decca, and now runs his own independent PR called Carboni Classical Media. He's also worked with a number of artists and organisations, including Bernard Haitink, the BBC Symphony Orchestra, the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, and also for BBC Radio 3 and the Proms. He's also the leader for a course in music business at the University of Hertfordshire, and he also lectures on music business at City University. He was awarded a PhD examining the changes in business and marketing models in the classical music industry over the last 20 years from 1989. It's a really fascinating thesis, so I'd urge you all to go and have a little read of it, a little bit of Christmas reading for you to do. Anyway, I met up with Marius on Tuesday and we had a really fascinating conversation. We talked about the functions and the purposes of marketing, what the methodologies are behind a marketing campaign, particularly with reference to classical music. And we also talked about audience demographics and what types of media they use and how to market to different audience demographics, as well as the influence of social media, technology, and where classical music is going in terms of its marketing strategies. So I really hope that you enjoy listening to this conversation. It's a good one. Do you think that you could just start off by just talking a bit about your involvement with classical?
I used to be a music teacher when I left university. After 3 years, and during those 3 years of teaching, I organised a small chamber music festival in Kent, where I live, in the holiday, and got used to dealing on a much more local level with local newspapers, local radio, publicising the events that were taking place. And then I got a job as press officer at Decca, and in my interview I was up against, as it turned out, one other person who'd already done some press, national press, for a record label, and myself. And so this particular person had far more experience than I did from dealing with journalists in general. And I said, well, I am dealing with local press and I'm looking at stories, I'm looking at angles, not just the concert itself. I'm trying to think laterally, if you like, and I'm trying to sell an event and all things that go on with the event. Anyway, the long and the short of it is I got the job, and from then I learnt to deal with the classical music journalists, which in those days were primarily in not only music magazines, but really there were a lot of them associated with national newspapers. There was no online in those days. And then I got headhunted to EMI a year later, and then I really built up my marketing and promotion career running the classical press office there.
Did you have any experience of marketing before you did that interview?
No, short of what I was, I'm a clarinetist, or was a clarinetist.
Okay. Do you still?
I conduct a choir,
okay.
Actually, so I'm still in music. If you're dealing in the music world and you happen to be a performer or you're trained as a performer, I think if you're able to find some time to do that, it's very therapeutic. And the other thing is, I think it gives you an understanding of the musical life, a musician's life, which if you're in the profession itself, but from an administrative perspective, a non-performing perspective, can actually help. So in terms of my own marketing promotion, there's no training at all. I just devised my own leaflets, made up my own press releases to get these concerts going while I was a teacher, and I've built on that ever since.
Yeah. Really. So were you really kind of learning on the job then?
Certainly when I joined Decca, I was learning on the job. I didn't know any of the national classical writers at all. So the first thing my boss at the time said was, right, you need to book up a lunch or a coffee or an early evening drink before these people go off to review concerts and get to know them, talk about the Decca product, get them to know you, and, you know, develop a relationship, because promotion and press and promotion is very different from marketing in the sense
what's the difference?
The difference is that promotion and press is all about dealing with particularly in press, you're dealing with someone. You have to persuade someone to talk about, interview your artist, write about them, put a listing in for the concert, put a picture in. You've got to persuade them to do that. And how do you persuade them to do that? You've got to either have a really good wacky picture. Okay. You've got to have a good relationship and say, this is really good, we just signed this artist, or this is a young pianist who's going off on this tour, he is really very good, any chance you could list it. So you've got to use your persuasive powers to do that.
Yes.
And also if there's anything else that goes with it. If that particular musician has climbed Kilimanjaro or something different, or has a sports car, something pretty, nothing special really in the long run, but something that's different from music that they can actually talk about it. My view always is, I always put myself in the view of the press, of the journalist. What is this artist? What would persuade me to list this concert, review this concert, write about this concert, against 4 or 5 equally good other ones, if not more? And there's always a space issue, but they're going to go for mine. How am I going to persuade them? I've looked at that from any project that I do. So press is all about dealing with, it's a personal relationship. Marketing is having a vision, having a strategy of what the musician, what the project should come across as. And with all marketing, you need to know, fundamentally, you need to know who is your core consumer. And with any project, you could say, well, I'm releasing this jazz album. There are people in their 20s up to their 90s who love blues, jazz. So I've got a huge demographic. How do I go about it? Yeah. And my answer always is, can't promote to all of those people in one go. What you can do is choose a core market. Who are the people that are most likely to listen to it? Look at that demographic and gear all your marketing to that demographic. And once you've established yourself there, then you can broaden it to other age brackets. So it's looking at deciding, once you've got that target group, what are those people between, say they're male and female between 35 and 44, suppose that's your core demographic. Where are they going to buy your music? What do they look at online? What magazines do they read? What type of newspapers do they read? Where do they get their music news from? Where would they look? If there were leaflets given out, if there are posters that are created, where would they notice that poster? And marketing is all about saying, okay, so it's that demographic, it's going to appeal, the design's got to appeal to that demographic, then either you do the design or you get in a designer that does it for you. So they're very different skills, actually. With all press and marketing, you've got to know exactly where you're aiming the project at. You've got to know who's going to go to it, who are the people that are going to buy your concert, go to your concert, buy your tickets, buy your album. And then everything else has to revolve around that. That's core for everything with press and marketing. But the difference is it's a personal relationship with press, and it's a visual, strategic vision. Identity. What's the identity? What's the brand? As a marketeer, is my product, and then how do I get that to the person who's going to be interested in that brand?
I feel that there's actually quite a lot of overlap between what the specialists do within the artist agencies or the record companies, but then you also have the PR firms they're doing a similar sort of thing, or are the two, do they have different functions?
It is a different function. So an agent is fundamentally someone who has contacts all around the world, contacts in concert halls, at festivals, live venue events, where they want to get the musicians that are on their books a date to perform. And if they do well, then they hope they'll be invited back the following year or whenever to do another one, maybe more than one. It's a bit of a role, and it's a very important role. And they look at the strategy, and an agent stroke manager will look at the strategy, the long-term strategy for a musician. What sort of repertoire are they doing? Should they branch out into some sort of contemporary music? Should they go, they're Baroque, should they go into Renaissance? Should they look at modern instrumentation? Should they look at original instrumentation? Do they keep to the piano? Do they think, well, actually, maybe I'm interested in much earlier music. Maybe I have to look at the forte piano. All those sorts of questions, career questions, which you're developing someone's career. That's what an artist manager, an artist agent does. It tends to be, the bigger agencies will have their own publicist. Other ones will do as much as they can themselves in a time limit, and others will bring in independent companies. And you can either have, so some of the much bigger artists will have their own publicists. The bigger
Yes.
artists we use the press office of the record label to generally generate PR through the music they're recording and releasing and get. And I used to do a lot when I worked at EMI. I used to do a lot of. Obviously, I was promoting EMI's recordings of the musicians
Yes.
were on our books. But that also led to publicising the concerts because the album was coming out at the time they were performing, talking to journalists about the festival as well as the concerts and so on. So there's an overlap between a press officer's job at a record company and say a press officer's job for an agency or an individual musician. The skill of an agent is very different from the skill of a publicist, which is very different from the skill of a marketeer, which is very different from the skill of a fundraiser. Different skills, they all come together for the musician
Yes.
or the orchestra
Yes.
or the opera, but they are all highly skilled but in their own individual way.
Yes.
And the same with I've been asked in the past, would you be my agent as well as do PR? Would you? So I said no, because I haven't got those contacts. I've got contacts in the media world, but I haven't got contacts to slip you into a festival or to, because it's all about personal relationships. You want to ring up someone in a hall and say, I've got this artist, just won this competition or been established for 3 years, just bringing out a recording. Could you give them a concert in your series next year? Because if they trust you and they think, okay, well, we could fit you in, they're not going to. So I've got to have that trust, and I don't know those people, and it's a completely different skill.
Is there a lot of selling that goes on, when you're meeting those sorts of people?
If you're a publicist, you're selling your artist, you're selling your music project.
Yeah.
If you're a publicist, a press officer for a major label, for any label, it could be a blogger, it could be a reviewer for a newspaper, it could be someone at the BBC Music Magazine, it's a gramophone. You're saying to them, can you review this recording? This is the next one that's coming out.
Yeah.
You know how well the last one did. How about it? So you want to say, okay, X has brought out this, or we just signed this wonderful new composer. Any chance for you writing about it? So it's a selling. Similarly to a music agent who is selling to a concert hall or a festival director, they're selling their artist and say, look, we think this artist will be really good for your festival. We think you'll do well selling tickets for it because it's a two-way process. And we think it's successful. It should be a successful project for both of us. They're all separate skills, and that's often forgotten about actually. In a way, the agent stroke the manager manages it. They're the centre because they are saying, okay, so they're looking long term. What's our 5-year plan for this particular musician, or this particular venue, or this particular festival? And so we're going to move in this direction. We need other artists to move with us. We need to start talking about what type of different marketing we're going to do. So you may have a successful festival, and the director thinks, well, actually, we've got a pretty good database from 50-year-olds onwards. We'd like to, get more 40 to 50-year-olds to come. That means maybe a slight change of artist repertoire, maybe certainly a change in marketing. How are we going to get to those people? Are we going to change the design? Is the colour of our website appealing enough? I mean, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a skill. But as I said at the beginning, it fundamentally, all of this slots into who is going to go to your concert, who's going to buy your music, and that's not just the classical industry; it's any genre.
Yeah. And
when you know who you're going for in terms of a target market to establish yourself, then the marketing, the PR, the repertoire is geared by that.
Wigmore Hall is a classic example. I mean, over the last few years or so, it's been making that real effort, hasn't it, to bring in younger audiences through its marketing materials and digital media, live streaming, all of that.
I think you call them the premier chamber music ensemble, probably in Europe actually, not just in the UK. Any artist in the chamber music field wants to play there. They've got this core audience that will just go. Yeah. And what they've done, you're quite right, over the last few years, they've kept that core audience. And that actually is always a challenge. And what they've done is not alienated the core audience. I've known music organisations in the past which have decided they need to get a younger audience and gone different marketing, different approach, different people, different front people, and they've been moderately successful in getting a new audience, but they have lost their core audience, and suddenly they've got no core audience to rely on. And a marketing skill is being able to broaden your market without losing your loyal customer base. Once you lose that, things go wrong, and if you've got nothing to fall back on. Because it'll take many years for a core audience to become your loyal audience, and you can lose them in a drop of a hat. So it takes a long time to get them back.
So who would you say is the the main audience for classical music at the moment? Is it still that very kind of traditional base, or expanding to younger audiences, or?
It is expanding. These IFPI figures taken from a 2018 yearbook, which covers all at 217. Looking at the age group here, and this covers all the genres: pop, rock, dance, soundtrack, film, hip hop, rap, name it. Classical and opera, the biggest age group, is 55 to 64, followed by 45 to 54. And then it goes down 35 to 44. If you're looking at core opera and core classical works, you would be thinking, okay, the biggest groups, 55 to 64 and 45 to 54. So what media do those people look at? Some will still look at physical music magazines. They still take a subscription out for a copy and get it delivered every month. Others won't look at music magazines, but look at other online news programs, kind of like all music programs or music media. So you have to as the organizer or as the person putting this on, has to decide, how am I going to split my devices? Is it going to be advertising? Is it going to be A5 leaflets? Is it going to be inserts? Am I going to look at, and again, you look at radio, you look at TV, where there's not much classical music on TV, but you know that as well as I do. What's the radio I look at? Advertising, for example, on Classic FM. Is it that sort of audience I want to get? Do I try and get my album on Record Review on Radio 3? Do I get it as Composer of the Week, if it's a composer you're talking about? And so on. There are a lot of outlets that you look at, and you're looking at that audience. If my audience turns out to be 16 to 24 and 25 to 34, then for classical and opera, then, which is, in this case, it's not, it's for rock and pop, I would be looking at not a lot of physical product. I would be looking at social media.
Digital. And
doing a lot of digital stroke social media, and focusing on that and saying, right, where am I going? Which social media? Are they tweeting? Are they on Instagram? Are they posting on Facebook? And if they're not doing that, and they ought to do that, then obviously you can help them do that, because it's quite difficult to do, actually, to write.
It's very time consuming as well.
Absolutely. Again, it's an art form.
It really is.
Because you've got to take people with you, you want to talk about the music, but you want to talk about it in an engaging way. You want to talk about your day, or the travel, or something that happened to you that was interesting the other day. And what you're actually doing is you're building up a following. And that following, that loyalty, which they will then follow you and then always go to your concerts, buy your music, because they're followers of you. Same in the pop world, there's no difference. The way you look at it would be different. I mean, for years people have said, classical music is dying out, and it seems to me that primarily it's an older generation that go to classical music and become interested in classical music concerts at a later age and stick with it. And this seems to be an evolving process. So, there are lots of modern technology that classical organisations use. I think it's broader than it's ever been, but fundamentally the core market is really 45, 50 onwards. And that's where you go for the bulk of your marketing, depending on the project, of course. And then you see what else you can bring with you.
And I guess that's also because of the values of classical music as well, and also it's a generational thing, I think.
That is a generational thing, and I agree with you. It's different for me, of course. I was always interested in classical music, but I look at my friends who are in their late 40s, early mid 50s, who have never been remotely interested in classical music, and I've known them for 20 years or longer, and they are now interested, curious about classical music. They listen to Classic FM. They'll listen to King's, Cambridge, Christmas Eve. They might go to an opera, might go to ENO. And they're experimenting. They start doing that. They've got a bit more time And they still like classical, still like pop music, still like jazz, still like what they used to. And I've seen this in my own friends. And this is why it's almost self-generating in a weird way. If it wasn't, classical music truly would have gone under years ago, when everyone was predicting it would go under, and it's still here.
Yeah, and people's tastes, I guess, they mature with age, don't they? I mean, what you liked in your 20s may not necessarily be...
Absolutely. A lot do seem to move into some form of classical music. The City of My Own Eyes.
Yeah.
So I think it will carry on in that way. I think what the classical music industry is, it's very innovative in the way that it markets and promotes itself. You have the YouTube orchestra, you have the virtual reality Philharmonia project. You've got here's the Orchestra, the Age of Enlightenment, a wacky picture of people all dressed in different shapes and clothes. What they're trying to get across and say, we are applicable, we're open to any and every, whether you're a type of person, whether you're in your 20s and riding a bike, whether you're a father or a mother or granny, doesn't really matter. And so the industry has always been really sharp in the way that it markets itself, to its broader market, modernised itself.
But do you think though that the growth of technology, and because just like pop musicians are using social media, the classical music industry realises, actually this is where our audiences are, and therefore we need to use those technologies in order to capture those audiences?
I think fundamentally yes, and most of them do. Some don't, because their audience just isn't interested in that. They're not performing to their core market is more traditional, for want of a better phrase. So they don't look online for what's going on. They don't interact with social media. They read the newspapers. They read a music magazine. They're on a mailing list of an organisation. They get a brochure in the post, or the orchestra sends them the brochure. They're on their mailing list, that sort of thing. And they get their material from there. So the Tallis scholars, for example, do not stream. They do not. They rarely use social media because they say their core audience just isn't. They don't reach their core audience through those mediums. Whereas the 16 blogs, they travel a lot, and when they travel, they write diaries, and they use social media. So Harry Christopher uses social. The late Signum label, which sign a load of artists, they have a guide to how to use social media, and they actually help you. They say, look, we think social media is really important. It's slightly different from streaming, but I'll come to that in a minute. They say, we think it's really important to interact with the potential audience through social media. If you're not sure how to do it, or you're uncomfortable with doing it, or you don't know how to write it, what to say, all that, we will do it for you. And that happens all the time. It happens in politicians. I mean, Theresa May, well, Donald Trump, does his own, but Theresa, I can't imagine has much time to do her own. There is an organisation, and she's got staff that do that. Absolutely, the classical industry has taken technology and is using it, and is very overt in using it. But not all use it, because it just depends on who they are targeting to and who they're marketing to.
Is it necessary for artists to be on social media? I think sometimes, it's a little bit obvious, when, maybe if, their messages have been kind of PR driven or something like that.
You've got to be inventive, you've got to be interesting, you mustn't come across as showing off, you need to be humorous, and ultimately what you're doing is saying, and actually I'm an extremely nice person, and I've got a fabulous concert coming up, come to it. And that's ultimately what it's all about. Or my next album is out next month, or please will you buy it? And some people are very good at doing it. Tasman Little is brilliant at doing that. Esa-Pekka Salonen is very good. There are a number of artists that are very good and they know how to do it. And I don't criticise those that don't know how to do it, because it is a skill. In which case,
it takes time, doesn't it?
It does. So you need a publicist, or you need someone to do it for you. It's managing the tone that the publicist, or whoever it is that's writing your tweet or doing your blog, that they get you correct. That it's the sort of thing that you would write if it was you actually writing it, someone writing it on your behalf. And that's quite difficult. So there's an art to it. But they do use it, and my view is the more social media interaction, the better. Any musician, because you can have established artists. So, a musician, they want to show their musicianship to as many people as possible. When people go to a concert, it isn't only people 50, 55 onwards. There may be 2/3 of the audience, but there are a heck of a lot that are under that age group. And so they want to reach out to them because they want them to come to more of their concerts, come to more of their, go to a tour of theirs, buy their recordings and so on, and maybe invest in recording. That generation deals with social media. Its life is all about media. And they're looking at the media.
It's the Instagram and selfie generation, isn't it?
So
WhatsApp generation.
If you can be there and be part of that, there is a chance you're going to reach to that audience. If you've got someone who's interested in that particular genre of music, and this doesn't just apply to classical, as I say, it applies to all genres. If you've got someone interested in a particular genre of music and they notice this legend of an artist, and they think, that was really funny because he said, she said that, you're going to, I'm going to follow them. And then you get, hopefully you become a bit of a follower, a bit of a loyal member. You might go, if I'm going to go to this is really wacky, I'm going to go to this. And you get in the habit of it. So my view is, yes, the more social interaction, because social media is all about the following side of it is you are creating a fan base in pop parlance. You're creating a group of people who, come what may, will follow you, not just geographically, but actually follow you online. They will say, so if you say, I'm changing my style of writing, I'm going to become more rock, I'm going to become more bluesy, I'm going to become more middle of the road. You need a core audience, because you're starting again almost musically, so you want to take your core audience with you and say, come with me, because it's not a million miles away from what I was doing before. This is how I am developing my musicianship, and I want you to enjoy it as much as you've enjoyed my musicianship from before. And they come with you, hopefully. And that's what social media and what online media activity is all about. Building that fan base, taking them with you. When you go off, or when you're doing something new or something different, you've got a core base that will probably buy it, probably go to it, and then you can focus on, okay, I've got them, now I need to get to an audience. If I'm broadening my musicianship to a different style within that genre, and it's going to appeal to a different age group, how am I going to get hold? I've got this core audience I need to take with me, and I need to build this new market, new core base.
Yes.
One opportunity of doing that is doing it online.
Certainly.
Genuinely.
And how do you see the future of classical music marketing?
I think there'll always be space for hard copies of music magazines. There will always be... Let me give you an example. So when the Kindle was launched, I remember everyone saying this was the death knell of the bookshop. Because people actually, and the books, because people won't bother with books anymore, because they have it all on this screen. Much more convenient, which is true. But they won't buy books. They won't go to bookstores. Therefore, bookstores are going to really come a cropper, and they're going to do that. And of course, that hasn't happened. There's been a sort of correlation between. There's been a side-by-side growth, actually.
Definitely.
And people like the feel. They like the idea of maybe ownership. There's a sort of, not against a Kindle, but there are both sides, so I leave it like that. Now in the music industry, in the last few years, the number of independent stores, I'm slightly widening the conversation, but I'll come back to your point in a minute.
That's okay.
The number of independent stores that have opened, there's been a rise in the number of independent stores that have opened. It's a symptom of, and I'm not saying physical's going to be here forever, physical product's going to be here forever, but it's a symptom of traditional ways of buying music side by side with the accepted view of buying music, or you either stream it, you buy the CD online, or you download it. But both are going, and there's been a rise in it, and it's actually people thinking, it's a bit like the bookshops. So independent stores, where people are in there, they've got a passion for whatever the music is, and you're passionate about your area of music, and you go in and you learn about it, and you may buy one, you may buy 2 albums, and so on. You still listen online. It's a mix. You still listen online, you still stream, you might buy stuff online, you might still download. But you also like the idea of going to a store. And that is cross-generational at the moment. And classical industry has always been innovative in the way that it markets, the way it sells itself, the way it's had to adapt. Ever since, probably, certainly in my lifetime, I remember the 1980s when Mrs. Thatcher and the Conservatives were in power, and they said, basically, it's a free market, less reliance on the state. We're cutting all these subsidies to all these organisations, one of which was the Arts Council. Certainly, most organisations were being, they're commercial, but they had to be really innovative with their campaigns, because they had far less state money coming in. How are they going to get their audience? How are they going to market? How are they going to manage it? How are they going to fundraise, get sponsorship for these concerts, and so on? And it has developed, in my view, since the early 80s, when it was sort of almost forced upon the industry, and not just classical, but the arts in general. And they've had to develop even further those skills, which they have done.
And that was my conversation with Dr Marius Carboni. I'd love to know what you thought of that, so please feel free, if you would like to leave a comment below in SoundCloud, or you can send me a message on social media, on Twitter or Facebook. The Twitter handle is Classy Podcast, and you can also visit the Talking Classical website, which is talkingclassical.wordpress.com. Join me in the new year for some more podcasts, and let me tell you, I have got some great guests lined up for next year. Please have a little listen from around mid-January, when the new episodes will be starting off for next year. I've got a feeling that they're going to be really good ones. All that leaves me to say is have a very lovely Christmas break, and I hope that you'll be able to join me in the new year.